Welcome to Sitting with Sally. Today I have with me Gloria Hunter Alcock. Many of you will know her as Gloria Alcock. Gloria's been living in Kenora for about 40 some years. We were counting them up. Before she retired, she worked as in the Northwest Public Health Unit and also went out to many of the isolated First Nation communities. That was before they had permanent nursing stations. But today we're going to hear about her grand adventure. Welcome, Gloria.
Thank you.
And your grand adventure, what was your grand adventure?
Well, it was the fulfillment of a lifetime dream, and that was to go as far north as I possibly could. So I trained as a nurse and a midwife, etc., and I ended up in a place called Tuktoyaktuk at the mouth of the Mackenzie River. It was on the dew line known as Bar 3. It's about 90 miles or so, air miles from Inuvik. And if you've been reading the paper and watching TV, you'll see that they're getting a highway.
Oh my.
Oh yes, until now they've been driving the ice road. And then in the summertime, well, that was just tough luck. You had to fly or go by boat.
And I know in wintertime there was a bit of dog sledding going when you were there too.
Yes, there was. And I tried to run dogs, and they all ran away, and I spent the rest of the afternoon hunting them down. I was very disappointed. You do not say mush. That's a Hollywood thing.
Oh, you don't say much at all?
No. The operative word is chop, chop.
So before you went up to the Tuktoyaktuk, you were working as a nurse.
Yes, I trained as a nurse in London, England, and then I ran up to Edinburgh where I did my first part midwifery. And then I came back down to England and did my second part midwifery. And then I came back to Canada where I worked at the Hamilton Civic Hospital. And I took 3 months psychiatry. And then I figured, well, okay, I know the top and bottom of the whole business. So I applied to the federal government, who gobbled me up.
And were you known as a midwife in those days, or was that a part of the nursing training?
I chose to have that as part of my training.
And I presume because midwifery's been in England and Scotland for
centuries.
For centuries, but not so much in Canada.
Ever since people have been having babies.
There have been midwives.
Yes, all over the world.
So you came back to Canada and you joined the federal government. And then what?
Well, then I lived in Tuktoyaktuk for 2 years and truly enjoyed it and grew up. It was shall we say, a growth experience. And then they wanted me to go to university to find out all the stuff I should have known. So off I went to Dalhousie University, and I was in the first graduating class of outpost nurses, which were the forerunners of nurse practitioners. Only with outpost nurses, of course, we learned how to look after dogs and cats and pulling teeth and all the stuff that nurse practitioners don't have to do today. But all the statistics that we kept after we graduated and went back to work went to formulate the curriculum for today's
nurse practitioners.
Yeah.
So outpost nurses, the thrust was that you would be a nurse isolated somewhere, no doctors available.
That's right.
Whatever was going wrong, it was up to you.
That was us.
Yeah. And just to go back, when you first got to Tuktoyaktuk, what were your first impressions?
I thought, oh, I've arrived. I love it. And having been brought up on the prairies, I like the broad expanse of looking forever and ever. It was wonderful. The people were very kind. They were curious. I mean, what's this woman doing here? Also, they were concerned that I wasn't married, nor had I reproduced, because you're not really a woman unless you've reproduced. So they kind of wondered, they were very polite, but they did wonder, and I said, well, I'm here because I've always wanted to be here.
And you were of a shocking age of 29 or 30 at that point.
Oh, no, I was very aged. I think I was 32 or 33, yeah.
And Tuktoyaktuk, it's on the Arctic Ocean.
Yes.
Above the tree line.
Yes.
And what else?
Well, it's on a narrow peninsula, and it was shortly after they had that disastrous, I guess you'd call it an earthquake or a tsunami or something that really devastated Alaska and part of the Yukon. So we held a big meeting as to what are we going to do for civil defense. And, well, if the water comes up, we get washed away. Well, all right, that's a given. But the biggest thing we had to deal with was fire. And so we decided we would use the water truck, not the sewage truck, the water truck. We thought that would be a good idea.
To have it available in case there was a fire.
Yes. So the deal was to keep it full, if you remembered.
And how did you fill the water truck?
It wasn't my problem.
Oh,
That was
as
somebody
long
else.
as it was full.
That was somebody else's problem.
You mentioned Badoo line.
Yes.
Many people have no idea what Badoo
Oh,
line is.
distant early warning. Now, at the end of the Second World War, when Russia started playing dirty tricks, they put in a dew line.
Not unlike today.
Yeah. Anyway, they started over in Alaska, and they went right across
And
the
they
country.
strung.
Yep. They didn't string wires. It was all through radio contact, right over to Jodrell Bank in the UK. So, as if anybody flew over, it was on the radar, and then they would contact them. They had incredible technical backup, and they would contact these people and say, who are you and what do you want?
And Badoo line, they would also be able to communicate with each other quite well.
Oh, absolutely. And men are worse gossips than women.
That's good to know.
Yes, I found that out. I always thought women were pretty bad, but men have a speech.
So talk about what the nursing station was like, what your daily life was like.
Well, I thought we had a wonderful place. It was, I suppose you would call it almost like a cottage. They have great big factory-looking things now, but in my day, it had a big living room with a dining room, all open plan, good kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and then we had a drug cupboard, 3 patient rooms and an office and a waiting room. It was built up pretty high because you have to build everything high, keeping in mind the permafrost. Because if you build down low, then the permafrost, of course, will melt and then you'll fall in.
So the heat from the building doesn't affect the permafrost.
That's right, yeah. And we were right in the center of town. This was really good.
And I understand you had quite a good store cupboard.
Oh, it was like a store. We had everything you could possibly want. Now, we had to order everything 18 months in advance. So, if the nurse before you liked Chinese food, fine, it was all Chinese food. If she was German, fine, there was all the German or Italian food or whatever she liked. So it was really a lot of fun going through the storeroom trying to figure out, I don't think I'll eat that.
And you would, whatever you're ordering, who knows who's going to be eating
That's
it?
right, who's going to like what I ordered?
So when you ordered, you would order how often?
Once a year, and that took a lot of time because we not only had to order our household supplies, like how much detergent do you need, but we also had to order in all the medical supplies. So, how many aspirins, how many x-ray plates, how many bandages, we had how many antibiotics, if so, what types. Mind you, we had very good, the government saw to it that we had very good direction.
So they knew how to keep it fully
Oh,
stocked.
yes, it was a case of tick, 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 tick.
Did you run out of anything?
Oh, yes.
What? Or can you remember?
Oh, I can't remember really, but we made do.
And I gather there was a lot of canned food dinners.
Oh yes, the canned chicken was terrific, and tulip bacon was wonderful. That was, I think,
Danish?
Danish, yes. And to this day, the canned chicken and the Danish tulip brand, and I'm sure people who've lived in the north know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a special taste.
I was going to say try and find canned chicken.
Well, and we had canned beef, and we had a lot of powdered thing. Now, you can't make top powdered turnips taste good, no matter what you add. Powdered potatoes weren't bad. Powdered milk, well, that's good if you put a couple of drops of vanilla in it. And when I came south to live, I couldn't drink ordinary milk. I always had to put vanilla in it until I got used to it.
And how was the nursing? How did you manage?
Well, basically, our job was to do first aid, first response, but then the rest of the time we spent doing public health, which was good. So we did all the immunizing. I inspected the ships that came in. I inspected the local little restaurant. And again, we had good forms, so you just had to go tick, tick, tick. And everybody laughed. They'd say, "Where's your hard hat?"
And what would you inspect the ships for?
Cleanliness. And also the galley, because we were going to eat there.
So part of a public
Oh, yeah,
health.
because every spring they'd send in a team of people to activate the ships. We had a big dry dock, floating dry dock, and there was a big tanker to take fuel around to the little Arctic villages in the Western Arctic, and there was a couple of supply ships. These were all on loan from the U.S. Army or U.S. government. So I had to inspect them all to make sure that the galley was good, and I even inspected the toilets.
And one of the stories, funny stories you've told me, is that sometimes you had to inspect the men too.
Yes. Unfortunately, or humans being what they are, they sometimes make contact with nasty venereal diseases, and then they
Commonly known as the clap.
the clap or whatever else they might have picked up, and then you'd have to chase around and find out, with whom they'd been with to acquire such a disease. And I had many, many diseases, or many, many answers. I think the funniest one was I was asking the fellow, well, now, where did you get it? And he looked at me and he says, in bed, stupid. However, I have seen, the bottom of the canoe, the floor of the community hall bathroom, behind the sand dunes. And I used to write it all down and send the forms into Edmonton, and they just, oh, look, here's another pack from Chuck. And they just loved it because it made their day reading about people's experiences.
Experiences. And were you a young woman of the world, or would these things make you blush?
Oh, I started blushing. I think the worst one was when I was told there was a big construction firm over on the other side of the village, and they were building the piers in for the ships to come in to do the oil exploration. So the foreman, he came over and he says, you are coming to inspect the men, aren't you? And I said, yeah, inspect them for what? He says, well, the clap and so on. I said, the other nurse always did it. And I said, oh, really? What did she do? Oh, well, they line the men up and they drop the doors. You take a look, and if they need it, they you give them a shot. I was appalled. I really was. And I said to the other nurse, oh, dear. Because I was designing a log cabin when I had my lectures. And I think she was writing a love letter or something. We did not pay attention to the lectures. Right. And so we got out the textbooks and nearly fainted. I said, I can't do that. And she said, well, neither can I. I said, what the hell are we going to do? So anyway, we went to church to pray about it, and we met a nice man there at night. It was an evensong, and he offered us a ride back because we didn't have vehicles. So we said, would you like a cup of coffee? So we were sitting chatting with him, and we said, we know your boss. And he says, oh, who's that? And we said, it's so-and-so. He says, well, girls, I'm sorry. I'm his boss. And he told us why. He was in charge of the whole thing. Oh, well, we've decided to come over and do the inspection. And he said, what inspection? So we told him, and the poor man nearly did himself an injury. He laughed so hard. And we'd been had. But can't you just imagine us turning up,
Thank goodness you met him.
Well, I think that's why you go to church.
That's what you
Oh, dear.
You wrote your experiences in a book called Nurse on Top of the World.
Yes.
Okay.
Nurse at the Top of the World.
Sorry.
When I was thinking about the title, I said nurse at the top, on top of the world. They said, no. If you say on top of the world, it sounds as if you're on drugs.
Right. So
Well, I've never been on drugs.
Nurse, but
At.
although you've given many.
I've given many.
Nurse at the Top of the World. And in it, I introduced you earlier as Gloria Hunter Alcock, and you were earlier explaining to me why the two names.
Yes. Well, because in the Arctic, and people who knew me from those days, or knew me when I was in Britain training, because I lived there for 5 years, that was my name. But then I married my husband, Bub, and I became an Alcock.
And that was here, of course.
That was here. Yeah. That was in 1980.
A few years ago.
Yeah.
In your nursing station, or in the book, you talk about quite a few of the more interesting cases that happened while you were in Tuck.
Yes, there were some very interesting cases. I think, what do you do when you're bounced out of bed by the Mountie at 2 or 3 in the morning, and he's got somebody who is, well, he's in a straitjacket, and the Mounties are frantic. They've been jumped out of bed, and we're standing around watching this man rave. And he's violent. He's very, very violent. And what he's going to do to the Mounties' parents and my parents and everybody else's parents is particularly white people's parents. You know, it's pretty gruesome. So they said, well, can't you give him a shot? Can't you do something? You know, and we can't put him in the cells because he'll hurt himself. And would you take him? I said, no, not near Nellie. I don't need him. So, you know, what are you going to do with this scene? And we know the radio is turned off in Inuvik, so there's no sense in trying to radio Inuvik. And then I thought up a really good idea. So I took out the ear syringe, which is about 6 to 8 inches long, right? And then I took out the lumbar puncture needle, which is about 6 or 8 inches long. And then I filled it up with water. And I got some knockout pills. And I just said to the guy, I don't care which one you take. You can have this one. Or you can have these, which one? Sally, I have never seen anyone too drunk, too drugged, too crazy that they will take this. They all take the pills. And of course, I give it to them with hot cocoa, which accentuates it. And I find that a lot of them are terrified that if they go to sleep, they will not wake up. They'll stop breathing. They'll forget to breathe. And you can smell the fear on them.
And why that fear?
Well, I don't know, but I've run into a lot of people who have that terrible feel. If they go to sleep, they'll stop breathing. So, you know, once the pills start taking effect, and you can say, well, take the straitjacket off, and they're sitting there, and you know, they're looking a bit like rabbits caught in a headlight, and you say, are you afraid to go to sleep? Because you'll, yeah. Say, well, I'll tell you something. I will be awake. I will be here. And you see the oxygen tank? If you stop breathing, I've got a cupboard full of drugs, and I got oxygen. I will see that you do breathe. Now, what do you think about that? So then you put a hot water bottle in the bed, and you know, make them cozy, and by this time they're starting to nod off, and put them into bed with the hot water bottle. Bob's your uncle, Nellie's your aunt, end of problem.
I suspect you don't stay up all night, but I suspect go back to bed yourself.
Of course. I have to work in the morning.
From your book, it seems like you developed a very warm relationship with the people who lived in Tuck.
Oh, yes, they were my friends. Yeah, yeah, and they still are. I still am in touch with a lot of them. And I get that magazine up here, and they're talking about people, and I think, I gave him his first shots. You know, and it makes me realize, oh, my hat, I'm you know, they're getting
old. Years have passed on.
The years have passed.
Here we have a few things, and I know they've all been given to you as gifts. If you can just talk about some of them and how they came to be and what they mean to you.
Well, this beautiful kayak was made for me by Donald Pingo. He was our janitor in Tuktoyaktuk. And when I left to go to university, he gave it to me in a beautiful box, all handmade. And I nearly cried because Donald never said anything, he only sniffed. And he was sniffing, I'll tell you, and I started to sniff too, because when you take a look at the handiwork, the fine sewing of the wet hide that he stretched over a frame, it's really quite mind-boggling.
And then when you look inside, it's all a lovely little wooden frame.
It's a wooden frame,
yep.
That's right, and this is his paddle.
It's beautiful.
And he also gave me a harpoon. This is an ulu. It's a smaller ulu. You can get them different sizes. But that was made by Felix Niaviak, who was a very old man. And the blade is made from an old saw. And then the brass part here, that was made from a ship that had run aground, one of the pipes that was on the ship that had run aground. And this part here is particularly interesting, the handle. That's made from chipping a tusk of a mammoth. Now, Felix had found that tusk many years ago on the Anderson River in the sand. When I saw him, it was still that big around and about that high. Now, he'd been chipping at it, making all the ulus for all the ladies, so it had come down in size. So you can, I realized the weight and the size of this mammoth must have been tremendous to carry that weight.
And this is very nicely balanced.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, he made me a set, and he sharpened them all. He even sharpened the little tiny earrings that he made me. So when I tried to put them in, I cut my finger. I thought, thanks, Felix.
An ulu is a woman's knife.
Absolutely. It's terrific. You can use it for chopping. I use it for chopping whatever you want. And you put the hide in your mouth like this and stretch it out, and then you scrape it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what it's really good for.
Yeah.
Okay, and here we have
Oh, that's Resolute Bay.
Resolute Bay. Oh, we aren't there yet, but you did also go to Resolute Bay.
Yeah, I opened the nursing station at Resolute Bay in 1969, and I was the only single white woman. There were only 3 other white women. I lived in the Eskimo village, and they didn't understand my brand of Western Eskimo, so and they didn't speak English much. So I thought, well, how am I going to work? What am I going to do? So I went to a school teacher who'd married an Eskimo chap, and she said, you don't learn anything because there's a blood feud going on between 2 groups. If they want you, they'll have to bring an interpreter. So it was quite difficult. People, particularly the older people, would bring in somebody to interpret for them. Or sometimes they'd bring in a group of people, so I knew I was getting an accurate. But once in a while, somebody would turn up with a child to interpret for their well, one lady turned up, she had some gynecological problems, and her 8-year-old son had to interpret, and I thought, oh dear, this isn't good.
I'm sure he didn't want to be there either.
But he just did as his mother told him.
And then you've got a flag over there?
Well, yeah, in 1970, we had the big centennial. This is when the Queen, the Prince Philip, Princess Anne, and Prince Charles came. And this was very, very exciting because they were toured around, and then somebody must have told them about, turn it this way, then you get the writing on.
Ah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
They must have told the Queen about the beautiful little Anglican church down in the Eskimo village. And being the Queen, she says, well, I want to go and see it. And they said, oh, but madam, you know, you're going to be off schedule. And she said, too bad. So she was taken in a bombardier. And Johnny Ekeluk, who was my janitor, he was also the lay minister, he came flying down the road on his skidoo to open the church, and behind him came the bombardier with the Queen.
With the Queen.
Yeah, and she went into the church, and what they had as an altar fall was this huge polar bear hide, and right in the center of it, they had in sealskin inserted into the hide was a cross. It was beautiful. They didn't have kneelers, and I always had to kneel on the floor, and they used syllabics, which was different because in Tuck we used, what do you call it, the Roman printing? Yeah. So at least that's how I could sing hymns or pray, because it was, you do it phonetically, but with syllabics, no.
And this little church, this Anglican church, what was special? You told me about the altar, but what was special about it that the Queen wanted to visit it?
Well, because she is a great Anglican, and of course she has been in all the wonderful, great big cathedrals, and to see something as simple as that with a devout community, she wanted to compare. And one of the things she did was she wanted to inspect the Girl Guides and the Boy Scouts. Now, what she does, apparently, is she goes along the line, and if she sees somebody who is different, she'll pay more attention to them. Now, there were 2 little girls, and they were filthy. They were not ironed, they weren't cleaned, they weren't combed, and so she came along to talk to them. Everybody else was starched right out of their life. And it was quite interesting because she paid attention to them. Of course, they couldn't even grunt. But all their life, they'd be able to say, the Queen talked to me.
Quite something.
Because their mother had a tough time making a living, and I don't think they had much advantages. But all their life,
they spoke to the Queen.
The Queen spoke to them.
The Queen spoke to them. Yes.
That's right.
Yes. And finally, this absolutely beautiful doll.
Oh, well, one of the ladies, I think it was Mrs. Pokiak, made me that doll. And
now she's wearing a Parker.
Yeah, and see the beautiful wolf ruff?
Yes, yes, yes.
And inside is the Wolverine, and inside the Wolverine you can see my hair, because she says, I need your hair. And she went, clip.
And it's red.
Yeah, I used to be red.
Now this is a Parker. This is very similar to what you wore.
Yes.
Someone made you a Parker.
Yep.
And there's another kind of woman's clothing.
a tigiyuk in the western Arctic and an amautuk in the eastern.
Okay, tell me what a tigiyuk is.
A tigiyuk is a very graceful thing. It comes down with a flounce at the bottom and a flounce around here. And it's lined with a very heavy
And it
blanket.
goes down further then?
Yes, it goes down below your knees, and it meets the top of your
Mucklucks.
mucklucks so that you never freeze your legs.
Okay.
And that's why, being a good swivel servant, I did as I was told. I had a parka made, and I froze my legs.
Quite seriously?
Oh yeah, I was in hospital for 10 days over that one. Yeah. Anyway, so they changed the cotton covering, usually at Easter, to show a new
And
beginning.
This is a cotton covering your yeah.
Yes, this is Grenfell cloth, I think. Yeah. Now,
And
an amautuk is the one where they have it looping down on their bottom so that you can sit on something, not freeze yourself, and around here. And they've got a huge, great big hood that comes around like this, and they keep their baby in the hood so they can bring it around to breastfeed if they want. With the amautuk, they keep the baby on the back and they put the baby belt on to hold it. So when a baby cries, and I know why women kill their babies if they don't stop crying. What you do, you put the baby, you check it to make sure. You put the baby on your back and put the belt around, and right away it's dark, it's warm, and it hears your heart beating. It thinks it's back inside mom and shuts up.
And you say you know about babies because you had a baby at a nursing station one time that wouldn't stop crying, right?
That's right. Several of them. I was so glad when Violet Kikowak came in and told me what to do.
Any other memories that you can think of that we have?
I could go on for days and days. That's why I wrote the book. And
That's why you wrote the book,
That's a
okay.
very cleansed version.
I gather it was. Everyone was very well behaved in that book.
Pretty well.
Pretty well.
I had to, you see, so many of my friends are still alive, and even the bad ones are still alive. So I had to, if you were good, you got your name in it. If you were bad, you were just the cranky man or the upset woman or, he who kicks babies out of wombs. But I didn't put the names in it. When anybody's name mentioned in the book, I sent them a copy.
Ah, wonderful.
Oh, sure. Well, I'd already phoned them and said, may I use your name? So then I got phone calls or letters saying, is that so-and-so? And I'd say, I don't know, I've forgotten.
I'm too old. I can't remember.
I can't, too old, forgotten.
So eventually you left, settled in Kenora, and you chose Kenora, I guess.
Yes, I did. Out of all the places in Canada, I could have gone anywhere in Canada. They wanted me to go back to a nursing station, but I had been bushed several times, and I realized that I couldn't go back to isolation. So I wanted a place small enough I could walk down the street and say hi to everybody, and I didn't have to run someplace to go shopping. And that's exactly what I got.
When you came to Kenora, you started working in the Northwest Health Unit?
No, I worked at, when I was still with the government, and I did the 8 reserves around here for a year and a half, and then I got kind of fed up with them, with bureaucracy. So I quit and went to the health unit. I was there for 23 years.
Before you get to the health unit, you were telling me a story that happened in Grassy Narrows, where you might be known as Mrs. Doubtfire?
Oh, well, that was the second time I went, when I lived in Grassy Narrows after I left the health unit. But yeah, that is a funny story because the children were beating each other up. I was forever looking after bloody noses and, even a broken arm once and bruises, and it was bad. And I went to Sister Irene, who was the principal, and said, well, they're your kids. You do something about it. I'm busy. I haven't got time. And she said, well, you're the nurse. You think something up. So I thought, oh, drat. So just at that point in time, Mrs. Doubtfire was the movie of choice. And I took a look at myself in the mirror and I thought, you look like Robin Williams. So I got a wig and got a big, enlarged my endowment and put an apron on, and I went around to each classroom and I said, no, boys and girls, it is not good to beat each other up. And every single classroom, and the beatings, that was that. I was sitting in the clinic and a lady came to see me and she said, can I ask you something? I said, sure, what do you want? She said, you're not really Mrs. Doubtfire, are you? I said, no, I'm her sister. Anyway, And even to this day, I have people who are no longer children, but they'll come to me in the mall or someplace and say, "Hello, Mrs. Doubtfire." So that was a good one.
That was a good one, yes.
Yeah.
And then, yes, you were with the Northwest Health Unit for many years.
Yes.
And then you retired. And funnily enough,
Well, I'm from Northwestern Health Unit. I went back to live at Grassy Narrows for a year and a half. And then I thought, I'm getting tired of this. So I quit. And Emma Paish came to see me, and she says, "We've got a job for you." I said, "Hey, I'm too old, too fat," and I ripped up all the papers. And she says, "No, but we really need you." I said, "Hey, I'm no longer a nurse. I can't do it." She said, "But you'll like this one." And I did about 6-8 months with Kenora Health Access, where I was, they were just getting organized, so I ordered in equipment and textbooks, and then when they started hiring nurse practitioners, I was able to help them orientate them. It was what a wonderful way to end a career. All that information I had in here, I emptied it out, and now it's totally empty.
And you mentioned that Esme Boone was one of the first people that you worked with.
Yes, and funny enough, on her resume it says, she'd been the nurse on the DEW line, nurse practitioner on the DEW line, so it was a radio interview, and I said, "Oh, I see, And what village is next to Bar 3? And she paused, and then she says, "Tuktoyaktuk." I said, "Hire her."
And as I was going to say, funnily enough, after you retired, you and I have got to know each other through the Cat Shelter fundraiser.
That's right.
You are the person who's open on Wednesdays during Market Day for the book sale in Market Square.
That's right.
People always laugh how I can always get the Cat Shelter into any interview.
That's right. Well, so you should, because it's a very worthy project, and I think Wednesdays, I'm wondering, because every time I go to close, that's when everybody comes. They don't come before.
Well, they go to the market first.
They go to the market first, so maybe I'll start sleeping in instead of being there at 9 o'clock.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then, of course, Saturday morning we're doing garage sales because we've got all sorts of wonderful things you never knew you needed.
That's what garage sales are all about.
That's right. So that is very, very interesting. We have people coming. But mind you, I do try to have it open by 9 o'clock.
Yeah. I was going to say, so you can find Gloria at the Cat Shelter,
Yep.
Gently Used Books fundraiser in Market Square. She always has a copy of her book there. She's always quite willing to talk about her adventures, and there's been quite a few adventures.
Oh, a lot of adventures.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, an awful lot of adventures.
And you're still very involved, which is great.
Yes, and if anybody wants a book, they can go to Hojo's or the museum or Redden's.
Perfect.
There you go.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.